Hello, everyone. I am Keanon Thomas, and I am so excited to be here and talking about something that is super applicable to all of us, especially in this modern age. So, real quick, I'm going to go ahead and quickly introduce the wonderful people that I'm doing this presentation with. So, first off, we have Alicia, and hopefully you can see her picture up there. She's got some amazing stuff prepared for you guys. Go ahead and say hi real quick, Alicia.
Hi, guys.
Okay, next we have Ingrid. Ingrid, she is excited to bring some awesome information to you guys. Go ahead and say hi real quick, Ingrid.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. So, real quick, our topic is going to be on gun violence. It's going to be on the reasons why gun violence happens, some of the statistics behind gun violence. This is a super controversial topic, so we got some really interesting stuff to start off on. So, real quick, just a quick introduction. So mine is going to be on gun violence here versus gun violence rates and also violence rates across the world, both in modern countries and also in countries that are more of a third world status, like Colombia, Ecuador, countries like that. And then the other two are going to be debunking some of the myths on gun violence. That's going to break down into like mental illness, how big of a factor that is, especially with the mass shootings we've been having today. So gun violence is at an all-time high. It's an epidemic that threatens all of our children, or at least that's what the established media wants you to think. So Time.com says no other developed country has such a high rate of gun violence. So notice the words that Time uses: developed country, high rate. This is very leaded. But what about actual violence? Is the United States really that high compared to the rest of the modern world? So Wikipedia has a complete list of all of the countries with a list of their murder rates. So on average, our modern countries, I'm talking Spain, United Kingdom, France, England, these countries are going to be within the 1 to 2 deaths per 100,000 people. So the United States is sitting at a 3.8 per 100,000 people. That's 3.8 for gun violence. So on average, in the United States, 1.8 people per 100,000 more are being killed than the average countries that have very, very strict gun laws or even gun bans altogether. So that begs the next question. So why is that? So as I look at the list of the countries that have really high numbers in murders and gun violence, I notice a major trend. So the countries that have the highest numbers are countries that are extremely poor or have extreme poverty. So these are usually more undeveloped countries, and when I say high, I mean really, really high. So for an example, Mexico is 22 per 100,000. Honduras is 91.6 people per 100,000. El Salvador is 69.2. So these numbers are insane. They're super high. So when it comes to actual gun violence, the United States is nowhere near the top. So here is a quick chart. We're going to share that right now. So as you can see, the United States is there. It's the fourth to the bottom. Up at the top, we have all sorts of countries. So none of these countries are going to be as developed as the United States, but still it shows that in the world, the United States is at the bottom. So that's a good visual for you to look at. Okay, so when it comes down to actual gun violence, as I said, the United States is nowhere near the top. So now we're going to go ahead and just jump right into debunking the actual myths. So you're probably sitting there thinking, I'm not surprised that countries like Mexico and Colombia have a higher death rate, but that still doesn't count for countries that are modern, like United Kingdom, Spain, and France. So you ready for the big kicker? The one thing that gun law advocates don't want you to know is 60% of all gun deaths in the United States are from suicide. Many professionals in the field think that deaths caused from suicide would happen regardless. The person had a gun or not. So take away the 60% of suicides from the gun deaths, that drops the United States down to 1.5 deaths per 100,000. So that's right in the middle of the most of all these modern countries. So what about the remaining 1.5 though? So where is the gun violence coming from? So it turns out 80% of actual gun violence is gang related. 80%. So this 80% of gun violence is coming from a source that is already knowingly breaking the law. So we can get rid of gangs, we can get rid of most of the gun violence in the United States, which is a huge eye-opener. Don't hear about that in the media, though. So JPFO.org tells us that leaves right around 2,200 gun deaths per year that are not related to gang violence or suicide out of the original 32,000 per year. So this is the relevant number about gangs and gun deaths and violence. This is the number that you don't hear about in the media because it's extremely small. Percentage of you actually dying out of that 2,200, it's 0.0006756% of being killed by a gun in the United States. Fortunately, though, it does happen. So that's what the other two are going to be talking about, is that small percent, and they're going to be talking about what can contribute to that. Hugely, it's finding out to be major mental illnesses. So now that we've broken it down, that gun violence in America isn't the big bad wolf that everyone thinks it is. The United States does have a problem, but that problem is crime, it's gangs, and unfortunately, it is mental illness and treating of mental illness. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn you over to Alicia. She's going to take over from here, and you're in good hands. We'll go from there.
Thank you. So, let's see, is it turned over to my face? It is? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so you can see my PowerPoint that I have prepared for you guys. And just to start off, gun control, like Keanon said, is a touchy topic nowadays just because it's so highly publicized and in the media. But did you know that at the broadest level, research has shown that individuals with major mental disorders are more likely to commit violent acts? And when we narrow that down on mass public shootings, we see a relatively high rate of mental illness. So for that, we're going to break down what mental illness is. And the American Psychiatric Association defines mental illness as a health condition where it changes your thinking, your emotion, or your behavior, or a combination of those. And it also creates distress or problems in your work life, your family life, or your social life. And then some statistics to go along with that, just to see how prevalent mental illness is. Nearly 1 in 5 U.S. adults will experience some form of mental illness in a given year. 1 in 24 will experience a serious mental illness, and 1 in 12 will have a substance abuse disorder, which does fall under mental illness. To give you an overview of some examples of mild to severe mental health illnesses, some of the mild ones are like ADHD, anxiety disorder, OCD, depression. Depression can be minor or major. And then some of the more severe ones are like paranoia, schizophrenia, bipolar, PTSD, things along those lines. And unfortunately, some people are predisposed to mental illness, and that breaks down into 3 different categories. The first one being biological, like genetics. The second being psychological, like past childhood trauma or the loss of a loved one at an early age. And then there's also environmental factors like financial issues or divorce, relationships, things like that. So to give you a background on mass shootings, there isn't a set definition for what a mass shooting is. There isn't a number of victims that have to be killed or injured to be considered a mass shooting. So for this instance, we're going to look at shootings from about 2013 to current, where at least 5 people have died. And I've created this graph. Hopefully you can kind of see that to give you an idea of within the past 5-ish years. In 2013, there were 12 mass shootings where at least 5 died. 2014, 9. 2015, 14. 2016, 13. 2017, 10. And then this year, we've seen 9 of those. And we're only about half over, a little bit half over. So unfortunately, we don't hear about that in the media. We only hear about the really extreme mass shootings, and because those are more publicized, we have more background information on the motive, as well as the mental illness background on those shooters. So we're going to go over those. The first one we're going to look at took place in 2007, It was the Virginia Tech shooting. And the shooter denied having suicidal or homicidal ideations. However, he was hospitalized in 2005 for threatening to take his life, as well as phoning the Cook Counseling Center a couple times indicating mental health issues like anxiety and depression. However, he did not want to seek treatment for those. Our next one is Adam Lanza, who was the shooter in the Sandy Hook shooting. He was diagnosed with anxiety, OCD, and depression, and he was urged to seek counseling services and medication for that, but his mom did not want him to be treated for that. He did commit suicide as well, so he suffered from anorexia, which went undiagnosed, which could have led to malnutrition and cognitive impairment. Anorexia is also a mental illness. Then we're taken to the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, and his ex-wife, Omar's ex-wife, described him as abusive and mentally unstable. And his coworker also advised that he would talk to him often about staying up late every night and researching antipsychotic medication because he had believed that he'd slipped into psychosis. We then have Stephen Paddock, who is probably most unfortunately well known for the Las Vegas shooting. His physician actually believed him to have bipolar disorder as well as depression. However, Paddock would not touch on that topic. He didn't want to discuss it any further. He was taking anti-anxiety medication, but he also had a gambling problem. And in the past 2 years leading up to that shooting, he had lost $1.5 million gambling. We then have the Texas church shooting by Devin Patrick Kelly, and he had actually escaped a mental health institution in New Mexico 2 years prior. And he also had a history of obsessive compulsive disorder with mass shootings and gun violence. And then our last one, which took place on February 14th of this year, was the Parkland shooting. And he had previously tried to commit suicide in 2016. And the Florida Department of Children and Family opened a case calling him a vulnerable adult due to mental illness. They also reported him to have depression, ADHD, and autism. So as you can see from the information that we've gone over, just from these 6 people that we have so much information on, they all share that common trait of mental illness. And with that, I will go ahead and turn the time over to Ingrid.
Thank you, Alicia. So going just from what Alicia had said, all of these places that she was talking about, so schools, libraries, federal buildings, malls, all of those are considered gun-free zones. So that means that weapons of any kind are not allowed in there or anywhere near it. So when you go in there, you don't expect to find yourself in a situation where a person with bad intentions comes in with a gun. So if you were in that situation, what would you do? Like, they wouldn't stop just because it's a gun-free zone. They wouldn't come in and not carry the gun just because there's a sign. So these are the questions that I think we should be asking ourselves. The people that go and do these mass shootings have this knowledge, and yet it does not stop them. So how are we supposed to know that children or even ourselves are going to be safe in a gun-free zone? So just from past and recent events, a shooter takes their own lives, just like Alicia has said, or tries to in some way when they're confronted by a police officer. And a person who is healthy or mentally stable wouldn't act like that. So so when things like this happen, we should not just sit around and wait for a gun control law to be passed. Like, yes, it would help with just gun control, but it wouldn't stop an unstable person or a mentally ill person from using a gun. Right now in the United States, the only thing that is required to purchase a gun is a background check, and that was put upon the United States right after the Sandy Hook massacre, and it's called the SAFE Act. So it just means that any mentally ill person doesn't have or cannot have a gun, but anyone that passes a background check can. And the thing with that is that mentally ill people or that have a mental anxiety, they wouldn't be in the background check as unstable, just because some of the mental illnesses are not considered dangerous. And then if you go and you do those, things everyday life, everyday life things like going to school or going to work, you're not going to expect someone to come in and shoot, the place. So that's why I think that for situations like this, we should be able to at least improve the SAFE Act with at least having everyone who owns a gun or is a gun owner have mental assessments where they could be properly diagnosed if they have mental illnesses, like all the past shooters from mass killings. And with that, it could be yearly or even just a few months. And this just the past events that have happened through the past years from early 2000s to even now, like all the mass shootings have been gone up year by year, day by day. So that should be proof enough that we should do these things so that we could protect our society. So, I mean, it's pretty interesting to see that this is what our lives have come to be. And with, gun control, I guess you can, take away as many guns as you want, but that doesn't stop a person from what they're thinking. You don't know what they're thinking, or if they've been diagnosed with a dangerous illness that could, eventually affect us or our children. But I hope you really enjoyed learning about our gun violence and gun control and how mental illness has to do or is a really huge impact in this world nowadays. So thank you guys for watching. Me, Keanon, and Alicia.